Today we're going to see if it's possible to stabilize toast, cookies, and a sponge using a special wood resin.
Guys, before we start today's video, we have an amazing guest with us today, Her Majesty, Her Highness, the Queen of Random, Janae Thompson.
So another one of the projects that I want to highlight that our family had a lot of fun with is the marshmallow gun. One of the things Grant wanted to do is my kids, I have all boys, they love to take things and wad them up and like spit them out of their mouth, or if they can get something to project them farther, they like to find out what materials are available to do that. So as parents, we want to encourage this creativity in our children, but we also want to keep it safe and keep it really fun. And one of the things that was a really fun idea was making a marshmallow blaster out of PVC. Now marshmallows are soft, they're edible, and they're really fun. And so Grant just took to this idea immediately. He created this really great recipe, I guess, for how to put the PVC together to increase not only the range of the marshmallows, but also the power. So you could kind of control it with your breath and make it a really powerful shot, or, you know, less powerful for little kids, right? So, so he made like 20 of these guns, and we had the most fun marshmallow blasting shot party out in our backyard. Our backyard got covered with marshmallows. And the funny thing was, after all of this marshmallow shooting, the kids would put their mouths all over the guns, and so they started getting really gummy to the point where there was just marshmallow goo everywhere and the marshmallows wouldn't really shoot out anymore. But then the kids went on a hunt and started picking up all the marshmallows off the ground, and they had snacks and treats for days. But we just laughed about it because it was one of those projects that we saw something that looked fun. Grant made this perfect assimilation of how you can create a projectile weapon that was safe, and we had a marshmallow war that was epic and provided treats and snacks for my children for days.
As an extra incentive to pre-order the book, those who pre-order can get a signed numbered copy, and the earlier you order, the lower your order number will be. So if you order now, you could get book number 1. In order to claim your signed copy, head down to the description and submit your receipt using the link. If you don't submit your receipt, you won't receive a signed copy.
So to pre-order 52 random weekend projects now, head down to the description below and click the link.
Guys, I like to do some woodworking, some knife making, stuff like that. And wood is a really cool material, but there are some downsides to it, specifically that it likes to change over time. And for some applications, that's actually a really good thing. You want and you like that change. But for some things, you want to shape and make the wood into what you want and have it stay exactly there forever. Wood likes to dry out and then absorb more moisture back into it. It likes to warp and twist and crack over time, and sometimes that's not what you want. Here's the basic idea. Using a type of resin that's usually for stabilizing wood so it doesn't warp or crack over time, we're going to see if we can stabilize some other things. A piece of bread, some steel wool, a sponge, and a couple others. Will it take to the resin the same way, and will we be able to make these objects permanent but look normal? So there are types of resin like this that are designed to fit down into the tiny microscopic cracks of the wood. And then you cook it and it stabilizes it. It basically turns into a hard plastic coating every tiny individual fiber of the wood so that it's no longer affected by humidity and age, really. It should just stay kind of the same forever. And for a lot of applications, that's really useful. For example, I have this piece here. This is, I believe, a piece of the same wood that I made my resin river table out of. It's just a scrap. This wood is not terribly durable. It's very lightweight. It's very porous. And if I wanted to use this long term, say for knife scales, I would want to do what's called stabilizing it. And to do that, we use what's called a stabilizing resin. Now this particular brand is called Cactus Juice. That's the most common one I know of. There are other types. This is just the one that I've used before, so that's why we're using it today. And here's how you usually use it. So I have this container here. This is our vacuum jar, and you do want to use a vacuum chamber for this. So what you do is you put your wood in the chamber, and then you pour the cactus juice over until it's enough to cover the wood. It's going to float, so you need to have some kind of weight to hold it down. You then seal the vacuum chamber and pull all the air out, and it starts pulling the air out of the wood. All the bubbles get pulled out, and you leave it in there for like a few hours, just letting it pull and pull and pull until the bubbles have at least mostly stopped. Then you add the pressure back in, And when you pulled all the bubbles out, some of the liquid tried to take its place, and then when you add the pressure back in, it gets squished all the way down. So you squish it all in there, and then you just let it soak, like overnight, and that helps ensure that the resin gets all the way into every part of the wood. After that, you take it out, and you cook it at about 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours. That catalyzes the resin and stabilizes it, so it's just basically plastic coating every single part of the wood. Today, what we're gonna be doing is using this same stabilizing resin on other stuff. So I've got several porous things here, and I wanted to see what happens if you stabilize them. And I've never done this before. This is truly like, I'm finding out at the same time. But I thought it would be really funny to try and stabilize a piece of bread. And then I thought it would be even better if we toasted the bread first, because that way, if it does stabilize, it will look just like a regular piece of toast, but it should be much more durable and long-lasting. Other things we've got, we have a sponge, got some fine grit steel wool, and some peanut butter cookies. I thought these would also be kind of funny coasters if they work. So we're gonna see if we can do all of these things. We are going to try and fit it into this little toaster oven. It's not really a good idea to use a normal household oven for this stuff because it does put off some fumes that you would not want mixing with food. So this toaster oven I only use for stabilizing stuff. This may be a fairly tight weave, but compared to the grains of wood, it's very, very loose. So I'm gonna dip this down in and, I'll vacuum chamber it. I don't think turning the vacuum on is gonna have any effect. I think it's just gonna soak it all up and get completely coated. And then when I take it out, most of it's gonna drain off. So we'll see what this does. Remember how quickly the wood started absorbing the liquid? Bubbles were coming out of it? No bubbles with the steel wool. It's not holding air in the same way. So I think it's already absorbed as much as it's going to absorb. So we'll see how much it holds on to. I'm gonna let it kind of rest on the plate. I think a lot is gonna drip out, and that's okay. Next up, we have an actual sponge. This, I think, is going to absorb the resin just the same way the steel wool did, but I think it will hold on to a little bit more of it because it's a sponge. That's kind of how they do. Oh yeah, look at that. Drinking it up. The air that's inside or underneath the sponge is like expanding and there's less air above, so it's giving it more lift. That's kind of cool to see. We'll let the air back in and put a rock on it now. Oh, it's lifting the rock. Oh, that's funny. There's so little air in the chamber that what air is in the sponge is just powerful enough to lift it up out. So that sponge should be well and truly soaked through. However, it's probably quite a bit more than we need, and you can see that it's draining off. So I kind of want to just squeeze this out. Not the most thorough squeezing. I'm not trying to drain everything, but I just want like a nice even coating covering everything without necessarily having like puddles and pools of it. Peanut butter cookies. See how much air is inside a peanut butter cookie. Quite a bit, it turns out. Although you should remember that each one of those bubbles you're seeing is like 40 times larger than it would be normally. So there's not really as much air as it looks like because every one of those bubbles is expanding due to the low pressure in our vacuum chamber. I'm amazed that it's still going, honestly. This is something interesting. I was talking about it with my cameraman, Mark, before I put this in. We were wondering if it would disintegrate, and it does absorb the liquid, but it's not water. There's no water in it, and so it doesn't cause it to break down the same way that water would. I think if we'd left this cookie in water for even that long, it would have just fallen apart by now, but it seems pretty much just as durable as it was when it went in. I'm not sure how much vacuum chambering this is gonna need either. It might just absorb it. You can already see bubbles coming out, but I'm gonna turn the vacuum chamber on just to be sure. All right, bubbles had not 100% stopped, but they had gotten to a point where I think we got almost all of it, and it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. I do believe that at this point we're actually just gonna have resin flowing out of the piece of bread. So this one I've vacuum chambered, obviously. The other one I just want to soak it and see if there's any difference between the two. If the vacuuming actually makes much difference in this case. Let it sit in the resin until it seems like it's absorbing. some amount. So after this is done soaking, we're going to put it in this toaster oven, 200 degrees Fahrenheit for about 2 hours. Something that's interesting is as the resin heats up, some of it does drain, and then as it solidifies, it often bubbles. So it's very likely that a lot of these will have bubbles on the bottom of them, possibly even slightly adhering them to this rack. We may have to break that off, but we'll see how it goes. Like I said, I've never done this before. Whew, all right, our oven is finished cooking and it's time to start looking at these things. So this, for example, this is some of the resin that like poured off, puddled down in the foil here, and this is what is now imbued into every one of these things. Our cookie started breaking apart fairly early on. I think just the heat made the cookie itself so soft that with the added weight from the resin, it just started falling apart. Oh, definitely absorbs water still. Oh, and just turns to mush. So our cookie is not very stable. Not so spongy. See, this part over here looks a little bit dry, so I'm wondering if, you know, it was resting like this, I'm wondering if enough resin drained out of it, but that part will still absorb water. Yeah, it's still absorbing some. I can't squeeze it back out though. So now it absorbs water, it just kind of holds it, because there is enough frame inside that I can't squeeze it. So parts of it are still like fluffy and flexible, but then parts of it, like it's definitely stiff inside, at least partially. Doesn't absorb a whole lot of water anyway, but yeah, that's so weird. It feels like steel wool wrapped around a hard piece of plastic. It didn't quite hold enough resin to completely stabilize and solidify, but there's some just in the middle that did stay, and that stuff is rigid, so there is some inflexibility to it. This is the piece of toast that was in the vacuum chamber, and this is the piece of toast that I just dunked into the water. I let it sit in there for a few minutes, but I didn't turn the vacuum on. That is pretty solid toast right there. I'm gonna soak a corner of this and see if it absorbs anything. I actually do see some water being pulled up into it. Not a ton, but some. Most of the time, if you put toast in water, it's just gonna go soggy immediately. This is not, it's still, that's what was just soaking in the water, was this corner. This one that was in the vacuum chamber is probably twice as heavy as this one. I think we have some pretty normal toast on the inside. The resin didn't get all the way through. Oh yeah, so the water, it's kind of like the cookie. The water definitely still ruins the structural integrity of it. Parts of it are actually, yeah, this is getting smushy. It took time, it took longer than normal toast would, but it definitely lost it. However, the piece that we put in the vacuum, again, that's the corner that was in the water. Stabilizing resin, interesting stuff, can get into pretty much anything that is not closed surface. So if it's porous, we can get the stabilizing resin in. If there's anything else you'd like to see us try to stabilize, go ahead and let us know down in the comments. Maybe we'll try it out. That's it for today, but you know we've always got more for you to see. Go ahead and click that box up at the top to check out our most recent video, and we'll see you in the next one. Talk to you then.